He kicked sand all over me to try and bully me off the beach. He had no idea who he was messing with. Our storyteller, a man in his mid-20s, was just looking for a simple escape. A quiet spot on the beach to read his book. But the sun was relentless, scorching the sand, and shade was the most valuable real estate around. After searching, he finally found it. A small patch of relief under a few trees. It was the perfect spot. There was just one problem. A couple of empty deck chairs from a nearby resort were already there. He knew better than to use the chairs, but the shade? That was on a public beach. It belonged to everyone. So he laid his towel down beside them, opened his book, and settled in. For a blissful hour, it was exactly what he wanted. He went for a swim, he read, he just enjoyed the peace. But then, a clumsy moment changed everything. He knocked over his bag, spilling some of its contents into the sand. Seeing the chairs still empty after all this time, he figured there was no harm in placing his bag on one of them for just a moment while he sorted himself out. He was wrong. Within minutes, he heard it. A low, angry grumbling. An old man, probably in his late 60s, was marching toward him, staring daggers and pointing furiously at the deck chair. Our storyteller immediately took his bag off, even offered a quick apology, though he felt a spark of annoyance at the man's aggressive attitude. But the apology wasn't enough. The man continued to groan and grumble, moving the chair around as if staking his claim. The storyteller tried to ignore him, tried to get back to his book, but the peace was shattered. And then, she arrived. The man's wife. Together, they formed a united front of fury. In thick, angry accents, they started berating him. "There is a whole beach to choose from, and you decide to sit right here?" they demanded. Now, here's the thing. If they had just come over and asked him politely, he would have packed up his towel and been on his way without a second thought. But their entitlement, their immediate hostility, it lit a fire in him. He decided he wasn't going anywhere. He looked at them calmly. "You could also choose to sit anywhere along the beach," he replied. That's all it took. They became even more animated, their voices rising. He told them he was doing no harm, that he was simply sitting on a public beach. This sent the man over the edge. He started shouting, his face turning red. "You're crazy. You're crazy. You put your luggage on my chair." Our storyteller calmly pointed out that he'd been there for over an hour and the chair had been empty the entire time. They snapped back that they had been there longer, a piece of logic so baffling he didn't even know how to respond to it. Finally, he just said, "Look, I don't have a problem with the situation," and turned back to his book. It was a clear signal. The conversation was over. Fuming, they set their own things down and stormed off into the sea, clearly expecting that their hostile presence would be enough to make him leave. He was actually just about ready to pack up and find some lunch. His stomach was rumbling, but this delightful couple, they had just given him the perfect reason to stay a little longer. He was going to outlast them. For the next 30 minutes, he sat there, pretending to read, occasionally glancing over at the couple as they floated in the water, constantly looking back at the shore to see if he was gone yet. What happened next is the part one still can't believe. The man finally gave up waiting and waded back to shore. Our storyteller kept his head down, his eyes on his book, pretending to be completely absorbed. He watched from the corner of his eye as the man picked up his deck chair and started moving it around him. Then, he deliberately held the chair directly over the storyteller's head, letting it hang there for an uncomfortably long time, casting a shadow over his page. It was a pathetic attempt at intimidation. He didn't look up. He refused to give him the satisfaction. But then the man took it a step further. He deliberately, and with purpose, walked directly across the corner of his towel, while he was still sitting on it, and as he did, he used his feet to kick as much sand as he possibly could all over him and his belongings. That was it. The line had been crossed. The storyteller looked up. "That was real kind of you," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I thought with age, you learned some manners." He let the words hang in the air for a moment. It's embarrassing for a man your age to behave like such a child. The man just scoffed, but the words had clearly hit their mark. And now, the game was on. Our storyteller wasn't leaving. Not yet. He sat there for the best part of another half hour, purely out of spite. He watched as the man's wife, who had refused to get out of the water, started to look like a dried prune, her skin wrinkling in the sun and salt. Finally, he decided he'd had his fun. He was genuinely hungry now. It was time to go. But not without one final flourish. He began to move slowly, deliberately. He carefully gathered his things, patting his pockets, making sure he wasn't leaving anything behind. He folded his shirt. He put his book in his bag. And then, he picked up his large, sand-covered beach towel. He held it by the corners, letting it sag in the middle. The old man was sitting in his deck chair now, watching him with a smug look on his face, thinking he had won. With one great, powerful swoop, the storyteller flicked his towel with all his might. A massive cloud of sand erupted, flying directly onto the great, blubbering buffoon. He gave it a couple of extra shakes for good measure, ensuring a thorough coating. The man's face went from smug to pure, crimson rage in a split second. He shot up, sputtering. Before he could even form a word, the storyteller pointed at him. "It's just the same sand you kicked at me," he said with a smile. Blind with fury, the man hastily grabbed a huge handful of sand from the ground and hurled it at him. But in his rage, he hadn't accounted for one crucial detail. Our storyteller had been sitting there for a while. He had taken note of the direction of the wind. And quite beautifully, the entire handful of sand was caught by the sea breeze and blown directly back into the old man's own sputtering, furious face. It was a perfect, poetic ending. He looked the man dead in the eyes. "Have a nice day," he said, before turning and strolling off down the beach. As he walked away, he gave a little wave to the wife, still shriveling in the water. And trailing behind him, he could hear the faint, defeated shouts carrying on the wind. IDIOOT. IDIOOT. This story is a masterclass in petty warfare. On a public beach, shared space is governed by unspoken rules of courtesy, and this couple broke every single one. They acted with pure entitlement, believing their resort chairs gave them ownership of the public land and the shade upon it. They could have asked nicely. They could have shared. Instead, they chose aggression. When they were met with calm resistance, they resorted to childish bullying, kicking sand, looming over him with a chair. They started a war of pettiness they were simply not equipped to win. He didn't throw the first punch, or in this case, the first grain of sand. He simply finished the fight they started, using their own tactics against them. So I have to ask, when someone is that aggressive and entitled in a public space, is petty revenge the only language they understand? Or should he have just walked away and let them win?